Lesson 9 for November 23 through to 29, Trials, Tribulations and Lists. Wednesday, November 27, Humbled before God. Question. Read Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 1 to 6. What promise was given here to the Hebrew people? What must this promise, along with others like it, mean to men such as Ezra and Nehemiah? Deuteronomy 30, beginning at verse 1. Now it shall come to pass, when all these things come upon you, the blessing and the curse which I have set before you, and you call them to mind among all the nations where the Lord your God drives you, and you return to the Lord your God and obey his voice, according to all that I command you today, you and your children, with all your heart and with all your soul, that the Lord your God will bring you back from captivity, and have compassion on you, and gather you again from all the nations where the Lord your God has scattered you. If any of you are driven out to the farthest parts under heaven, from there the Lord your God will gather you, and from there he will bring you. Then the Lord your God will bring you to the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it. He will prosper you and multiply you more than your fathers. And the Lord your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your descendants to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, that you may live. Ezra and Nehemiah knew the prophecies. They knew that God was going to bring the people back from captivity. We saw in Nehemiah 9 that they understood their history and the reasons for their troubles. At the same time, too, they knew God's graciousness and leading despite their sins. Thus, they trusted in the Lord that he would make the return from captivity successful. Those promises, however, didn't mean that they would not face many challenges along the way. In much of this quarter so far, we have looked at the trials and tribulations that they faced, even amid the promises of God. Question. Read Ezra chapter 8, verses 16 to 23. What was the challenge here, and how did they respond to it? Ezra 8, beginning at verse 16. Then I sent for Eleazar, Ariel, Shemaiah, Elnathan, Jarib, Elnathan, Nathan, Zechariah, and Meshullam, leaders, also for Joab and Elnathan, men of understanding. And I gave them a command for Iddo the chief man at the place Casiphia. And I told them what they should do to Iddo and his brethren, the Nethinim, and the place Casiphia, that they should bring us servants for the house of our God. Then, by the good hand of our God upon us, they brought us a man of understanding of the sons of Mali, the son of Levi, the son of Israel, namely Sherebiah, with his sons and brothers, 18 men, and Hashabiah, and with him Jeshiah of the sons of Merari, his brothers and their sons, 20 men. Also of the Nethinim, whom David and the leaders had appointed for the service of the Levites, 220 Nethinim. All of them were designated by name. Then I proclaimed a fast there at the river of Ahava, that we might humble ourselves before our God, to seek from him the right way for us and our little ones and all our possessions. For I was ashamed to request of the king an escort of soldiers and horsemen to help us against the enemy on the road, because we had spoken to the king, saying, The hand of our God is upon all those for good who seek him, but his power and his wrath are against all those who forsake him. So we fasted and entreated our God for this, and he answered our prayer. Despite the promises, Ezra knew just how dangerous the journey was. Thus, the fasting and the humbling before God were ways of acknowledging just how dependent they were upon the Lord for their success. At this time, with so many dangers ahead of them, the idea of asking the king for help and protection had at least occurred to Ezra. But in the end, he chose not to do that, in contrast to Nehemiah, who did have an escort to protect him, as we read in Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 9. Then I went to the governors in the region beyond the river and gave them the king's letters. Now the king had sent captains of the army and horsemen with me. Ezra obviously felt that if he had asked, it would have brought dishonour to the Lord, for he had already said to the king, "The hand of our God is upon all those for good who seek him, but his power and his wrath are against all those who forsake him." Ezra 8, verse 22. In this case, it worked out well for them, for he later wrote in Ezra 8:31 that the Lord had protected them and they made it to their destination safely. Ezra 8:31, Then we departed from the river of Ahava on the 12th day of the first month to go to Jerusalem, and the hand of our God was upon us, and he delivered us from the hand of the enemy and from ambush along the road. And so to finish today, of course, we are to trust in God for everything. At the same time, too, what are times we do call upon even those not of our faith for help? In many cases, why is that not wrong, but perhaps even appropriate? This week's lesson has been read by Dr. Percy Harrold from Queensland, Australia. It is brought to you by Hope Channel, the Sabbath School Department, and through the services of Christian Services for the Blind. A video of this podcast also occurs on YouTube. Remember, God is always faithful.